Okay, today we're going to talk about rates and unit rates. So to start out, the definition of a rate is a special type of ratio that compares quantities with unlike units of measurement. Okay, so for example, here we have you ride your bike 28 miles in 2 hours. Okay, so when we're talking about rates, we're talking about things with different units of measurement. So in this case, the miles in the 28 miles and the hours in the 2 hours are our two types of units of measurement. Okay, so how can we write this as a rate? So it's very simple to write something as a rate. It's just like writing a ratio, except we have to include the units because the units are part of the rate. So in this case, we can write 28 miles over 2 hours. Okay, and just like a ratio, this can be written in different ways. So you could write it as 28 miles to 2 hours. So see how I wrote it with the word 2, but I also abbreviated the units, that's fine. Or I could write 28 miles to 2 hours. Okay, and we can find equivalent rates the same way we find equivalent ratios. So it asks how many miles would you ride in 4 hours? And then how about 5 hours? So if we set up a table, just like we have for other ratios, okay, we could do the miles here and the hours here. Okay, so we're starting out with 28 miles to 2 hours. All right, so if we're going to try to get to 4 hours from here, we just have to multiply the 2 times 2 to get 4. Okay, so then that means we just have to multiply 28 times 2, and we would get 56. Okay, now the next question it asks, so does that mean that in 4 hours we would drive 56 miles? Okay, so that's answering the first part of this question. Now it asks for 5 hours. Okay, so 5 hours. So to get from 2 to 5, let's grab a different color here. To get from 2 to 5, we can't just multiply 2 times a whole number to get to 5. So there's a couple of different ways that we could do this, right? We could see that when we go up by 2, so we multiply by 2 here, we are going up by 28 here. So then if we're going up by only 1, instead of going up by 2, we're going to go up by 14 here instead of going up by 28, because that's half of 28, 14. Or what we can look at is we can see that to go from 2 to 5, we have to multiply by 2 and a half. Okay, and we could figure that out by doing 5 halves, which is equal to 2 and a half. Okay, so then we could multiply 28 times 2 and a half. Okay, so if I do that over here, we do 28 times 2 and a half, so we could either leave that as a fraction or as a decimal. Okay, so 5 times 8 is 40. This will be 2 times 5 is 10, plus 4 is 14. Placeholder 0. 2 times 8 is 16. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. All right. Okay, we put 1 place after the decimal there. Because of that number there, we get 70. Okay, and that makes sense because little bit ago I said that we could just add 14 to the 56 to get 70. Okay, so we just answered, we used the rate to figure out how far we'd be able to go in different hours. Okay, so now let's look at a unit rate. So a unit rate is a rate, so just like we talked about, in which the comparison is to 1 unit. Okay, so unit means 1. So what is the unit rate if you biked 14 miles in 2 hours? Okay, so we have 14 miles in 2 hours. So going a little bit slower in this instance here. Okay, so we want to try to figure out how far are you going in 1 hour. Then that's because that's the definition of a unit rate, out of 1 hour. Okay, and so to get from this 2 hours to 1 hour, we divide by 2. Okay, that's just how we do equivalent ratios, equivalent fractions, equivalent rates. Figure out what we multiply or divide one of the parts by, and we do it the same thing to the other. So I'm going to take this 14 and I'm going to divide it by 2, and I get 7 miles per 1 hour, and that's my unit rate. And we could write this as, or oftentimes you'll see this as 7 miles per hour, or mph. Okay, so an example of a unit rate is the speed limit on a highway, okay, or on any road. So if the speed limit is 40 mph, that means that you can go 40 miles per hour, which means that if you drove at that constant speed for 1 hour, you would be driving 40 miles. Okay, now we can use this information to then figure out the answer to this next question, which is how long would it take you to bike 126 miles? Okay, so we know that we have 7 miles per hour, and we want to figure out what is this equivalent to if I travel 126 miles. Okay, so to figure that out, we need to, and our units down here is going to be hours, we need to figure out what do we have to multiply 7 times to get 126. Now, I don't know about you, but I haven't memorized my 7 times tables quite that high, so I'm going to have to do the division out. So I'm going to do 126 divided by 7, because to figure out what we multiply by, we divide. We do that inverse operation. Okay, so 7 goes into 1 0 times, 7 goes into 12 once. We subtract the 7. 12 minus 7 is 5. We bring down the 6. 7 goes into 56 8 times. That is exactly 56. Okay, so that means that we would have to multiply 7 times 18 to get 126. So we're going to do the same thing with the 1. Multiply that times 18 to keep it equivalent, and we get 18 hours. Okay, so to travel 126 miles, it would take you 18 hours. You're probably not going to do that all in one day. All right. And finally, a unit cost. A unit cost is just a specific kind of unit rate that describes the cost of 1 unit of product. Okay, and this is helpful in figuring out better deals. We're going to talk a little bit more about that tomorrow, and you did a little bit of that yesterday with your Coca-Cola better deals. Some of you guys might have actually looked at unit rate. Okay, so here we have a store sells 4 apples for $2. What is the unit cost? Now, typically with ratios, we pay attention to the order that the question asks us, right? But with unit costs, we always want to figure out the amount of money it costs per 1 unit. So in this case, a unit is going to be 1 apple. So we want to figure out the cost per apple. So that means that we want the cost on the top of our rate, so $2 per 4 apples. See how important it is to put the units here so we know what we're talking about? Because you might be then comparing the cost of oranges or something. Okay, and we want to figure out the cost of 1 apple. So to get from 4 apples to 1 apple, we divide by 4. So we need to divide the 2 by 4. Okay, $2 divided by 4 is going to give us a half. And a half of $1 is 50 cents. Okay, so we are going to write 50 cents like that. Now remember, when we're writing 50 cents, if we're writing it with a dollar sign, it needs to be $0.50. If we wanted to write 50 cents, we could write 50 cents. But notice how those are slightly different. So 50 cents per one apple. That's the unit cost right there. Okay, let's look at one more example. A bottle of shampoo costs $3.60 for 12 fluid ounces. What is the cost per fluid ounce? Okay, so here we have $3.60 for 12 fluid ounces. That's what that FL stands for, which is different than the weight ounce. And we want to figure out how much does it cost for 1 fluid ounce. And this is especially good if you're looking at different shampoo bottles or sunscreen. And sometimes it's actually a better deal to buy the bigger bottle because it's cheaper per fluid ounce. Okay, so to get from 12 fluid ounces to 1 fluid ounce, we divide by 12. So we also need to do that here. We divide $3.60 by 12. So $3.60 divided by 12 might sound a little bit scary, but it's not, because 36 is divisible by 12. Okay, and I'll show you that right here. So 12 does not go into, can't go into 3. So I put a 0 there. I bring up my decimal point, and then 12 goes into 36 exactly 3 times. Okay, so I can subtract the 36, and that's a 0, bring down the 0. Now, typically with division, we would stop here because it doesn't matter. 12 goes into 0 times. But when we're dealing with money, we actually do want to go to that second decimal place, because this is equal to 30 cents per fluid ounce. If you had stopped and not put this 0 here, some people might interpret that as 3 cents, which is not correct. It is 30 cents. Okay, so it's just better to put that 0 in the tenths place to help us see that. Okay, so for this, the unit cost is 30 cents per fluid ounce. Okay, so that's just an introduction to rates and unit rates. Good luck.